Before we start the show this week, I've got Tyler Carlin. He's with us this week from Bacon and Eggs. It's a movie lovers podcast. Hello, Tyler. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Now, I wanted to bring you on Fancounters because Bacon and Eggs is one of my favorite movie review podcasts. And the reason I say that is your show is so fast-paced, but it's put together so well that you just want to stay listening the whole entire time. So tell me a little bit about the chemistry that you and your co-host have and how you present your show. Tell my listeners about your show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, those comments. We work very hard to make sure that we've got the content that we want to produce. Ethan and I have been best friends since we were in the 6th grade. The concept for the show was actually born out of when we were kids. We didn't have like a ton of money to actually do any shopping or anything when we went to the mall, but we did have like $20 each, so we could go to see a movie and get some popcorn, and then afterwards we would go hang out at the Barnes & Noble next to the theater, and we would just talk about the movie for hours and hours and hours, and that's sort of where our love for film review came from. And then, you know, our show, we start hard on a critical film review. We look at, you know, what is the budget and the critics saying and all of these things. And then we sort of let the conversation go wherever it's going to go. I mean, we've had conversations about the dangers of frozen yogurt. We've had conversations about, you know, our insane road rage and stuff like that. And it's a lot of fun, and it sort of goes in every direction. We have a lot of fun with it.
Now, one of the comments that I've heard several times from you and your co-host is that you've said it's the longest movie you've ever seen. And I don't know if that is like a new thing for Hollywood, because here where we live, my co-host Elizabeth and I, we go to movies all the time because we have $5 Tuesdays. So for $5, we're seeing a movie almost every Tuesday. There's not a lot oftentimes out there to pick from. And when you're sitting there, you're like, man, can this thing just end? And then when you think you've got a conclusion and it keeps going, you're like, no, you had a point. You could have just shut this down. So are movies getting better? Are they worse? What are you finding when you're looking through reviews and doing them yourselves?
So pacing is a huge problem for us. I'm a huge fan of like a 90-minute film. That's like the ideal scenario for me, just because I'm a super busy person. So like I have to sort of compartmentalize all of my hobbies, and film is one of those. And I just want to be like in and out as quick as possible. And I also want it to feel like it went quickly. I think, you know, overall, I think movies are getting better over time. That may be blasphemous, but, you know, like, I love the new Star Wars trilogy that we're working on right now. I'm a huge fan of, like, the entire MCU. I think that those films are just wonderful and exciting romps. But a lot of times, you know, take like the Lego movie, for example. You've got a 90-minute film, but it's paced so fast and there's so much that happens back to back to back. It feels like you're in the theater for 3 hours. You can kind of lose interest. And, you know, that's not ideal. I don't like to ever have to look at my watch or look at my phone for the time while I'm watching a movie. I want it to just be I want to be sucked in and enjoying it the entire time. That
is definitely an indication of a good movie or not. Did I check my phone to see what time it was and how long I've been sitting here during the process? So, yeah. Anything else you want to tell me about Bacon and Eggs? And first of all, make sure you tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, Bacon and Eggs, it's a movie lovers podcast. It's for anybody that's ever watched a movie. It's available wherever you get your podcast. It comes out every Thursday. It's even on Spotify, which was like a joke early on in the show that we weren't there. To find the show, really, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Bacon and Eggs Pod. We post a lot of fun and interesting stuff there. And then we have an amazing Facebook community, which is free to join for anybody. You just search the Bacon and Eggs fans group on Facebook, join it, and we post fun polls and stuff like that for like listeners' choice type episodes, and it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun with all of it.
Awesome. I love that, listener's choice, because I like to have input into the topics that the show does.
Yeah. We're doing listener's choice next week. We're on like a big animated film kick. We just did all the Lego films, and then this week we're doing How to Train Your Dragon, and next week is a listener's choice animated feature. It has to be a feature, like a film feature, like went to the theaters. I'm pulling hard for Pokemon the first movie, but I have a feeling we'll end up doing something from Pixar.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be tuning in as well as you should if you're listening. Tyler's Bacon and Eggs podcast is awesome. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. All right, we're going to get to our Fan Counters episode this week. Welcome to Fan Counters. My name's Nick.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And you can follow us on Twitter at Fan Counters Live. You can also join our private group on Facebook. If you look for Sharpie Nation, you can join the group and the discussion and talk about all of our episodes.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome stuff.
Well, we just hit 75, so you got 75 episodes that y'all can be watching or listening to. Sorry, not even watching.
Yeah, but you can catch up, and if you want to just breeze by them all, you can listen. If you listen to 2 episodes, episode 25, we reviewed shows 1 through 24.
Yep.
And then episode 75, we did 50 through 74.
Yeah.
So you could really catch up quickly and then just join us live.
Right. But there were some pretty fun moments along the way, so listen to them all.
We're going to have another fun moment today because Elizabeth brought us another guest. Who do we got?
Yeah, I keep getting yelled at because I have friends who do things and I don't share until later on in life. We are going to interview one of my high school friends named Nancy Armour.
Nancy, you might have seen her name in the USA Today. She is a sports columnist and gives a lot of editorials on sports.
She does. Sometimes she actually covers sports, but for her main job, she is a columnist and writes for USA Today.
Now, we had a great time interviewing her. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but there is a great story about Nadia Comaneci coming up at the end of the show. So stay tuned until the end for that.
Yeah.
All right, you ready?
I am. So here is Nancy Armour.
Elizabeth's friend.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fan Counters with Nick and Elizabeth on the PodFix network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom.
Can I take a picture? We're going to, oh my God.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
Well, guess what? I have a big surprise for you.
That's why we call it Fan Counters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Nancy Armour, welcome to Fan Counters. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Now, hey, we've had the opportunity to interview celebrities, but we've never had anyone on the show that has the same job as us. But the only difference is you are working on a pretty much a larger scale, working at the USA Today. So can you kind of tell us about what working at USA Today has meant to you? And did you always intend to be a sports journalist?
Oh, Lord, no. I often tell people that if you had told me this 30 years ago, and Elizabeth, you can testify to this, that this is what I would be doing, I really probably would have laughed at you.
I was surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I always liked sports. I always followed it. I always liked writing, but the thought of doing the two of them together never really crossed my mind. And I covered sports a little bit in college. I went to Marquette, and then I went to work for the AP, and you have to do a little bit of everything. And so I did some more sports there. And about a year and a half into my career with the AP, I became the correspondent in South Bend. So I had the northern third of Indiana. One of my responsibilities, as you can imagine, was covering Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. And the more I was doing sports, the more I discovered I really enjoyed it. And fortunately, I had a boss who was willing to give me other assignments, like the Final Four was in Indianapolis one year, the Indy 500, kind of testing me out to see how I would do in other things. And like I said, the more I was doing this, the more I realized this is what I really loved and this is what I wanted to be doing. And so here I am.
A lot of the pieces that I've read from you are somewhat opinion pieces. Are you kind of more giving your take on things, or are you reporting factual things about each event?
No, now my title now, or my role now, is I'm a columnist. So it is, as I like to say to the people who write me angry emails, it is literally my job to give my opinion. So, there are still some things that I do news reporting on or strict reporting, but no, my primary responsibility is to be a columnist.
Tell me about getting to be working at the USA Today. I know that you mentioned you were started in Indiana and that kind of thing, but at what point do you make that jump and get with this major publication?
Well, like I said, I had worked for the Associated Press, which is the wire service. And one of my bosses there, she had been our number 2, our deputy sports editor. She had gone to USA Today to be their sports editor. And when my primary boss, who had been the AP sports editor for 20 some years, when she retired, I was talking to the boss who was then at USA Today and said, "Are you going to come back?" And she said, "No, but could I convince you to come to the dark side?" Joking, obviously.
Okay.
And I said, "Huh? Are you kidding?" And she said, "No, would you want to come work for us?" And I said, let me think about it. And I was at a point that I needed to kind of make a change. And the job that I thought I was going to USA Today for was going to be very similar to my old job. I actually kind of pulled a bait and switch on me because she intended for me to be a columnist and just didn't tell me that because she knew I'd turn it down. So that's how I ended up at USA Today. It's, my career has all been pretty much a series of happy accidents, I like to say.
So even though you primarily work in sports, have you seen the way journalists are treated that has obviously changed over the last 2 years since President Trump's, and he uses the term a lot, fake news. How do you feel about that?
Oh, it enrages me. Because fake news is stuff that is made up. It is, an alien, or I had an alien's baby. That is fake news. Fake news is not simply things that you don't like, or things that portray you in a light that you don't want. That is not fake news. That is simply reporting. So yes, as you can probably tell, I feel very strongly about this. And we get that a lot. I mean, I mentioned about the angry emails from people who don't understand what I do, and that's one of it. People will say you're writing fake news, or you're being biased. All we want is the facts. Well, that's fine, and we will provide you that too. But it is my job to be a columnist. It is my job to give you my opinion. If you don't like it, you are more than welcome to disagree. But it is, I'm not making something up. And the thing that I think bothers me the most is that I've been a journalist for my entire career. So 30 some years, almost 30 years. And I've never met anybody who would make things up. It's the exact opposite. We get things wrong. We're human. That happens. But when we do, it just sickens us. I did something stupid a couple weeks ago. I was writing about the kid who's the quarterback for Clemson, and I got his jersey number wrong. And it was something stupid. It's inexcusable, and clearly it still bothers me. I mean, I didn't sleep that night once I realized the mistake, because that shouldn't happen. So the idea that any of us would make things up, would, do things to get people personally is just, to me, it's offensive, and it's wrong. It makes me very mad.
Is that something that's talked about within the office, even from people who are reporting mainstream news? Is that mentioned a lot?
We talk about just how the tenor of the business has changed and the reaction to us. One of the things it's kind of a push-pull type thing. The news industry is going through incredible changes, and many of them are not good. Papers are closing, reporters are losing jobs, chains are being bought up by venture capitalists or hedge funds. And there was just a study that was released today by a group that found that the drop in journalism, especially at the local level, actually leads to more political polarization. And that is a really scary thing, because the free press is a bedrock of democracy. And when we lose that, we're not going to get it back. It's one of those things that we're not going to realize it until it's too late. We have those discussions about what does all of this mean. We talk about when we get the angry emails or the bad responses or the nasty responses on Twitter. You kind of have to have somebody to bounce those things off of, otherwise you go nuts. But so yes, we talk about all of that and, the causes and the effects and all of that thing, because at the heart of it too, we're news junkies. So this kind of stuff interests us. And it, besides being our job, it's something that fascinates all of us.
Now, I obviously know you and know that you have, we went to high school together, that you have, it's one of my favorite things. We got to follow you to do the Olympics. So I want you to tell me, what are some of the highlight events that you've been able to cover in your career?
The Olympics and I've done 5 World Cups in soccer. Those are my 2 absolute favorite events to cover. They're just, I grew up watching the Olympics as a kid. I wanted to be Dorothy Hamill when I was little. I wanted to be Nadia Comaneci when I was little. So to be able to actually be at an Olympics is just completely insane to me. And every time I go to Olympics and I get on the ground and see the rings for the first time, I will admit I get a little choked up because it still is just an incredible experience to me. The thing that's so neat are just the people that you get to meet, the different stories that people have and the different challenges that people have overcome to get to an Olympics. And there is something, and this is going to sound totally hokey, but there's something really, really inspiring and cool and mesmerizing about seeing people from a country all come together. They wouldn't know each other. They probably would never encounter each other outside of, you happen to be in an Olympics and you see somebody else wearing red, white, and blue, and so you go up and talk to them. And seeing the pride that people have in representing their country it's pretty awe-inspiring.
Have you covered major sports championships, Super Bowl, World Series, NBA Finals, anything like that?
All of them, yes.
All of them.
I do the Super Bowl on a regular basis. At least I have since 2011, I think it was. I do the Final Four every year. I've done the Masters. I've done World Series mostly when it's been in Chicago. I've done NBA Finals. I'm trying to think of the last finals that I did, though. Last final? No, I take that back. I was there in Cleveland 2 years ago.
Okay.
Or no, was it last year? They all kind of tend to blend. Yeah.
Oh, I believe that.
Cleveland for the finals. I did not go to San Francisco for the Golden games at Golden State, but I was there for the games in Cleveland.
Are those events like just being able to be there and walking on the field or the court? Talk about just kind of the majesty of being able to cover such a large event. And is that kind of like, you've reached the pinnacle of your career when you are reporting on that scale?
Yes and no. The very first time you do those, you kind of, it's somewhat overwhelming, but at the same time, it's also part of your job. And that's not to say that I don't appreciate it. I am so incredibly grateful, and I know how incredibly fortunate I am. So yes, I am grateful every time I get to do one of those events, but you also have to treat it as, and I'm going to pull out an athlete cliche, just another game, because you can't let yourself get too overwhelmed by it. You can't, I have a joke with one of my friends that I always say, like, is something going to be too big? And you can't let it get to that point. So you have to be impressed by it, but not be daunted by it. And is it the pinnacle of a career? Yes, but at events like that, you will see people from national papers, from ESPN, from Sports Illustrated, but you'll also see people from the local, the local papers that cover a team. Like when you've got a team like, say, maybe not the Patriots now because they make it so often, right. But if you were, say, from, like, if the Colts made the Super Bowl, you would see people from obviously the Indianapolis paper, but you would also see people from, say, Lafayette and probably Bloomington, just because it's their team, and those papers are going to want to give their readers an idea of what it's like for their team to be in this, this huge event. So, if you're listening to this and you're, early in your career, this is something that you want to do, don't think that there aren't other avenues to get to events like that.
Now, I want to get into talking with you and get your opinion on some of the topics that are going on in sports right now. But before we do that, and I probably should have given you this heads up before, but on Fancounters, we always ask our celebrity guests what it's like to meet their fans. So my question to you is, have you witnessed any athletes or celebrities interact with their fans, and have any of those interactions stood out to you?
Yeah, you'll see people meet, or lined up waiting to meet the athletes after an event. It's always really touching to see how, the athletes, the athletes know what they're doing is cool and it's unusual, but they are still at the end. I mean, they're people. And so the fact that there are people who want to meet them, who are impressed by them, especially early on in their careers, it's pretty neat to watch them kind of, have that recognition that, wow, people want to meet me. So it is kind of fun to see those interactions.
So we've had a female sportscaster on our show. And I want to know who did we have on?
Taylor Bisciotti from the NFL Network.
Yes. And,
Okay.
And so I want to know how you feel over the course of the last 30 years you have been treated as a female who is trying to do sports.
It's gotten better. We're still not on equal footing.
Okay.
But it has gotten better. You know, I the entire time that I was in South Bend, I was the only woman who covered sports. So it was me and, a dozen guys at every single game, at every single event. And, there were some challenges, people trying to kick you out of locker rooms and things like that. It's better now because there are more of us. And fortunately, most of the athletes have grown up being covered by women, whether it was in high school or college. So we are not a novelty to them anymore. Okay. But you still have, like last year, Cam Newton made fun of one of the beat writers who works for the Charlotte Observer. Basically said something, I think it's funny to hear a female talking about routes. And if you know this woman, she knows more about football than pretty much anybody. I mean, she can talk like routes and breaking down schemes like nobody's business. So you still have that occasionally. You still have, I get at least one email a week telling me to either go back to the kitchen or what do I know? I've never played sports before, or I've never played football before. So how would I know? Those kind of things. Okay. But it is getting better.
Wow. I didn't actually think about columnists and stuff having haters and being on that end of things, but crazy.
Well, and I would almost even say, because having worked at a newspaper, they feel like they have more access to you. If they're upset with someone who's on TV, they're not going to necessarily stop a second and write the television station. Mm-hmm. But a journalist at a newspaper is very accessible because most of them allow criticisms to be written in the paper. And so I'm much more fast to, bash her where I can get my voice heard. Yeah. Go ahead.
We used to actually print the emails of all of the columnists in the paper, and we don't do that now. And that was not my choice, and I didn't have a problem with them doing that. But it's funny because I think you're right. And also, too, and I think this goes back to what you were asking about, has the attitude changed? Most people, when they send these emails, don't think they're ever going to get read. I think they're just venting, and they have an avenue to do it now, as opposed to sitting down and having to, write out a letter and put it in an envelope and stick a stamp on it. Now they can just, hit send and it gets to me. But it is funny that, most of the time somebody will send me a nasty email, and I read them all. And I respond to every one of them. Sometimes it's just a thanks for writing and sharing your thoughts. Sometimes it's a little more trying to dialogue. But almost anytime I do that, I can think of 2 or 3 times that it hasn't worked. But those people come back to me and say, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't think that you'd actually read that, or I didn't think that you'd actually respond." Well, I did. So here you go. And then they end up I've got a group of, I call them my little pen, my pen pals. But one of the guys is a guy who started out that way. He was railing at me for something. I can't remember what it was. I responded to him. He responded back to me. So we, started exchanging these emails, and he doesn't write me every week, but every month or every 6 weeks or so, I'll get an email from him telling me what he liked and what he didn't like. And, just sometimes he'll just tell me about his golf score. So.
Nice.
All right.
Now, over the past few weeks, I've been following the stories that you've been reporting on, so I want to get your take on some sports news that's relevant right now. So let's start with your pinned tweet on your Twitter, which you can follow her at NR Armour, ARMOUR. Probably the most important issue for parents, protecting our kids against sexual abuse. You can talk more in depth about the article you wrote, but why is winning Olympic medals more important, or at least that's how it seems, than protecting our athletes against sexual predators?
Well, it's not more important. There's nothing more important than protecting kids against sexual predators, be it in athletics or any other kind of extracurricular activities or education or whatever. So there is nothing more important. But I think a lot of it is, being naive. Parents assume that will never happen to their child, or that they have trusted that the groups that are, running their kids' teams or running the organization that their kids belong to have vetted the people who are working with their kids. And that's not always the case. My colleagues, Rachel Axon and Brent Schrattenbauer, and I found, and this was very cursory look, but we found 6 coaches who continued to coach in all varieties of sports after they had been banned for sexual misconduct. And some of these people it was an investigation done by their sports governing body, but there were a couple people who actually had been convicted of sexual misconduct offenses, and they continue to work with children. Most disturbing is when you find parents who know about it and don't, it still doesn't dissuade them, but that's right. A whole other issue. So I think I think parents are coming to realize more that they need to be their child's biggest advocate, that they can't rely on other people to provide a check, because that's not happening, unfortunately.
During the Larry Nassar trial, we found out that some of the women and girls who were abused had told people about the abuse, including police, as early as 1997. And as you explored
94, actually.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
As you explored in the story, are we getting better at investigating these allegations right away? Obviously not, if nobody did anything in 94.
I hope we are. I hope that Larry Nassar changes things, but we just saw, 3 weeks ago, I think it was, there was a figure skater who had been given an interim suspension because somebody had filed a safe sport, which is sexual misconduct complaint against him. And then that was upgraded to an interim suspension because there were 2 more complaints filed, and my colleague Christine Brennan wrote that those two additional complaints involved minors. Well, he ended up, the coach who was involved ended up killing himself. And the number of people who criticized my colleague for writing about it, the number of people who defended the coach, it remains stunning to me. It's, you might know, and that is the thing too, is you might know somebody, but you don't know them in that way. Predators are smart, cagey people, and they don't walk around with a scarlet P carved into their forehead. I mean, right. They are good at fooling people, at hiding in plain sight. And so just because, when somebody is accused, and just because you know that person, doesn't mean that the abuse didn't happen. It doesn't mean that the person didn't do what somebody says. And so I think that's the other thing that's the one thing I think that we need to get better at, is not immediately casting blame or trying to poke holes in stories of the accuser immediately. And that goes at, whether it's a child who complains of sexual abuse or an adult. We need to take a look at these as we would any other crime. And I always say this, that, if somebody broke into your house, the public wouldn't say, well, why did you leave that window open? Why did you have such nice stuff? And that's what we do with sexual abuse complaints, and we need to stop doing that.
USA Today did provide a good amount of links on how parents can check to see if their child's coach is on a banned list. And if you follow Nancy's Twitter, which we will put in the comments of this podcast, you can also look at that list and just check, because, we're in Wisconsin and there was, I think, 6 coaches on there.
Oh, goodness.
So that would be a good thing for anybody around the country to check out.
Yes.
Right.
And, know too that just because, if somebody's not on that list, that doesn't mean that, necessarily that your person or the person coaching your kid is, in the clear. Just be aware. And if your child expresses some concerns or says some things aren't right, trust your child and look into it more. If a coach is calling or texting your kid, if a coach is volunteering to drive kids home or have them sleep over, those should be huge red flags for any parent.
One of the more disturbing things that's been going on in sports for a long time is what we've been dealing with the Cleveland Browns. Kareem Hunt assaulted a woman in a hotel hallway. It's all caught on video. And what I always think is, if it happens once, it's probably happened before, especially if they're going to do it in a public place. What goes on in that private place? So the Browns aren't the first team to sign a player who's assaulted a woman, but do you think we should forego signing a great athlete because of their actions off the field.
Well, and Hunt is a little bit different because the incident that you referred to, it was not intimate partner. He did not even know this woman, and that doesn't excuse it by any stretch. But if this had been an incident of domestic violence or intimate partner violence, experts have often said that a no tolerance plan doesn't work because that just often causes more tension and could actually lead to more violence. So that's one of the things that I've come kind of has changed my thinking a little bit. I am okay with second chances as long as the person has proved they are deserving of them. And that is the problem that I had with the Browns is we don't know if Kareem Hunt is deserving of a second chance. And we don't know, the Browns haven't spelled out what they're doing to hold him accountable and make sure that he's accountable. And when their GM had his news conference the other day, somebody asked if he had talked to the victim, and he said no. And I'm not sure how you can claim to do a thorough investigation when you have not even talked to the other person involved in the incident.
Right.
And, this was not Hunt's first, as you said, it generally is not the first one, and it wasn't. There were he was in a fight in a bar in Kansas City, and then also at another fight at a resort in Ohio. So this kind of stuff, it's learned behavior, and we've seen that time and time and time again. And I wrote this the other day that if teams are going to sign these guys, and we know that they are because all they care about is winning, then we need to make sure that we're breaking the cycle of violence, because this person, whoever it is, their NFL career or whatever sport they're playing, that only is going to last for 3, 5, 7, 10 years at the most. There's a lot of life that they're going to have after that. And so for all of us, we need to make sure that we are doing things that will help this person get the help they need, help them learn better behavior patterns so that, they're not leaving the league and then just going and reverting to this terrible person and then teaching their children or other people that that's an okay way to behave. We've got to break the cycle of violence. And, that's the biggest problem I have with NFL teams right now is I don't think that they're doing that enough.
All right, we're going to move on to a lighter topic.
These have been heavy.
If you listen to the podcast, this is really not my area of expertise. I'm the light-hearted one. So let's talk about the season that is coming up. It starts soon. It's the Major League Baseball season. That is Nick's favorite. Nick is a huge baseball fan. And there's interesting rules that could start as early as this year. Where do you fall on the universal DH proposal?
I struggle with that because I obviously the Brewers were in the AL when I was growing up, and I was a huge Brewers fan. In fact, the first fan letter I ever wrote was to Sixto Lizcano. So, and if you know his name, you are an old school Brewers fan. But so, I liked the DH. I mean, that's what I grew up knowing. But when I got to Chicago and I was covering the Cubs, I like the strategy of the pitching matchups and how not having a DH forces a manager to use his pitching staff differently. So I like both. I like having one league one league that has it and one league that doesn't. I get the arguments that it should be all or nothing. So I don't think I'm in favor of it. I understand why they're doing it because the pitching, all of the pitching changes drag out the games forever. But I feel like there's got to be a better way to do it than adding a DH to the National Leagues.
Yeah, and I'm actually on the opposite side of the fence. I'd like to see no DH in both leagues just because the game is more interesting, having seen it both ways like you.
And I think I'm guessing if you did a poll, I think more people would agree with you because there is nothing that enrages baseball fans more, I think, than should the DH exist or not. But I don't think that will, doing away with it completely will never happen because, again, they're trying to speed up the game. And these constant pitching changes are part of the reason that the game has slowed down as much as it has.
The other change that I think is going to have some impact on the game is the mandatory 3-batter minimum for pitchers. So it's going to eliminate those pitching matchups, the changes just for matchup sake. So is this good or bad for the fans? Because if you're a fan of a team and a diehard fan, you're going to want to have those matchups. But if you're just a casual baseball observer, having constant pitching changes, slowing down the game, isn't helping you get into it. So
didn't even realize they did it.
Come on.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah.
I mean, I realized that
yeah.
their pitchers changed, but I thought it was just because that he hadn't gotten enough hits or something, or he
was too tired.
Yes,
Yeah, okay,
that's why
I
I
get
thought
it.
they switched him.
I get it.
Hey, Natural Blonde, please speak slowly. I don't need to know all this stuff. I go, I eat a hot dog, I come home. I mean, I'm done.
Look, Nancy's probably got an opinion on this.
I understand why they're proposing
tied.
it, but and a lot of times, like, you know, I live in Chicago. Joe Madden is famous for overmanaging his pitching
my
staff
goodness.
or not managing it enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I get the rage about it, but at the same time, you know, there's a reason for doing that. You don't want a right-handed pitcher facing, you know, lefty batters. Like, and also too, the thing I'm wondering about too, what is this going to do to certain pitchers? Because there are guys who are one-out guys, or they're they're total specialists. I mean, we're not even talking like just a plain old middle reliever. We're talking somebody who you only bring in for a left-handed batter, or you only bring in for, you know, somebody who is a really good fly ball hitter. So I don't think I like this one.
I don't either. I like the opportunity to do matchups, because you're going to get those outs in key situations. You got the bases loaded, and you're scared to make a pitching change because of what could happen after. I mean, I don't know. I think that takes away some of the decisions a manager can make.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
So pitchers and catchers are reporting today. I know this podcast is on a couple-week delay, so it's going to sound weird. But as of today, Bryce Harper and Manny Machado still don't have a job. And we are on the verge of the regular position players starting. So are these guys holding out for these 10-year deals? We've heard some GMs, the Marlins past GM and the Astros GM, speak out saying that these things are a deal, you know, long-term deals are a thing of the past. Where do you think these guys are going to sign? Not where, but for how long, and are long-term deals on the way out?
I'll take the second one. Yes, I do think I don't think you're going to see an Alex Rodriguez or career-long deal ever again, because Rodriguez is a perfect example of the Yankees were hamstrung by his contract and they couldn't do anything about it because nobody was going to pick it up. So they were stuck with him,
right?
You know, through the PED suspension, and then, you know, when his production tailed off. And same thing if you've got pitchers who just all of a sudden go south. So yes, I do think I don't think we're going to see those deals again. Maybe every once in a while for like a player of his generation, but I don't even think we'll see it that much. As far as Machado and Harper, I think it's a combination of probably the years and the money. And, you know, baseball in a lot of ways the contracts have been driven by the players, and the teams have kind of had to give in and say, okay, yeah, we'll give you whatever you want. And so I think this is also somewhat of the teams' ways of taking back some control from the players and their agents and saying, you know, the days of these massive contracts and you dictating how much, you know, you're going to get this huge deal, those days are gone. So I think there's a little bit of both in play, but I also think that, you know, within probably a couple of weeks, we'll see both of them get signed.
For sure. But what do you think? 4-year deal? 6-year deal? That's kind of my prediction.
Machado getting a 4-year deal. I could see Harper getting more like a 6 or a 7, just because, you know, with Machado, I think there's also the question of his behavior. Mm-hmm. And you know, is that somebody you want on your roster long term if you don't know what he's going to do?
All right, let's move on to the next topic.
We're going to be done with baseball because I don't understand that either. It's not my job. Okay, earlier this month, Lindsey Vonn won a bronze medal in downhill at the World Championships in Sweden. I didn't even know. Like, how this obviously wasn't a big story, and why haven't we heard very much coverage about it?
Well, skiing, like most Olympic sports, you don't hear a lot. But, you know, it pops up every 4 years, and then you don't hear a lot. And also, too, with Vonn, I think it was she has been injured so much and really had not skied a whole lot this season. And her plan, she wanted to go through next December. But after coming back and her knees, bothering her again, she made the decision, okay, the World Championships are going to be my last races. But she made that decision only about 10 days, 2 weeks before World started. So there wasn't a whole lot of time to have build up. I did think it was funny. That was I wrote a column on Sunday morning after she finished, and it is one of the best performing pieces that I've had in the last 2 months, I think, behind 2 columns from the Super Bowl. So people do pay attention, but I think it did kind of sneak up on people just because we didn't, she made the decision that, okay, this is going to be my last race. And it was only, like I said, 2 weeks out from when the World Championship started.
Bob Costas believes he should be standing on the right side of history, and he's demonstrated that in the past. He's reported about the NBA and Michael Jordan's gambling debts, talked about steroids in the MLB before that was addressed, and now he went after the NFL, talking about concussions in the sport, and it seems to have cost him. He got booted from the Super Bowl covering that. So is Bob Costas going to recover? Will sports let him back in?
I don't think he necessarily needs to recover. He's Bob Costas. And I think he's at an age that he was maybe looking to slow down a little bit anyway. But I think if Costas went to, ABC and said, hey, I want to do your college football, or I want to do this, they would probably say, okay, what do we need to do to make this happen? Mm-hmm. The NFL, and I said this yesterday on Twitter, if anybody thinks that the NFL's power is diminishing, this is a perfect example that it's not. It is still the biggest game by far in our country. And if you're a broadcaster, you're scared of crossing the NFL because you don't want to lose these TV contracts.
A couple weeks ago, we talked with PBA bowler Kyle Troop and discussed whether or not bowling should be an Olympic sport. What do you think? No.
No.
She was really fast with that. No.
That would be one sport I would watch.
Oh, my God. It's bowling.
It's awesome.
Sorry. And I know that I am a Wisconsin native, so I know that this is like betraying my heritage, but it's not a sport.
It's a beer fest.
It's an activity. It's a physical activity, but there's a difference. And I'm sorry, and I'm going to pick off the auto racing people, but I don't think auto racing is a sport either.
I don't think that's a sport. I'll agree with you there.
It's the number one watch sport in the country, NASCAR is.
Nancy and I say no.
No,
it's not.
not anymore. Not anymore. It hasn't been for years. But no, bowling it's fun to do. It's it involves some physical exertion. But no, to me, it is not a sport.
It's a late night activity with glowing balls and bumpers.
Exactly. It's something to do when it's raining in Door County and you are camping in a tent.
All right, we are winding down here, and I'm going to kick Nancy off because she doesn't agree with my bowling to be in the Olympics, but that's okay.
I don't either.
Sorry.
I'm going to side with Nancy on this.
After winning another Super Bowl, we heard a lot of positive and negative things about Tom Brady. Well, even before that, you recently wrote an editorial about reasons to love him or hate him. So share with us, where do you stand on Tom Brady?
First of all, and people in New England hate me for this, but I think Tom Brady cheated. I do believe that Deflategate, was a thing that he deflated footballs to make it easier for him to throw. Mm-hmm. But I also don't think that is the reason that he has won 6 Super Bowl titles. And, you can hate the Patriots. You can think that Brady is arrogant and smug and whatever. But you also cannot deny the fact that he has won 6 Super Bowls. And, the Patriots in 18 years have gone to 9 Super Bowls. That's absurd. It is so hard to get there. And for that to be pretty much a regular part of their schedule is just mind-boggling to me. And that doesn't happen if you are not a darn good quarterback. And he is. And so I think, whether you like him or not, I think you have to give him credit as probably the greatest quarterback of all time. I mean, at least from a Super Bowl perspective. Wow. And just for playing at such a high level year after year after year. And as the pieces around him have changed, I mean, you look at the guys that he played with in his first Super Bowl, they're gone. His primary receiver, I think he's on his third or fourth one. And yet he continues to make plays, and he continues to get the Patriots, if not to the Super Bowl, pretty darn deep in the playoffs. And that's something to be admired.
Nancy, we talked earlier in the podcast about any time that you may have witnessed a celebrity and fan encounter, but have you ever been starstruck yourself in your career?
So I mentioned when I was a kid, I loved the Olympics, and I wanted to be Nadia Comaneci when I was a little kid. Like, I did what I thought were gymnastics routines in my basement. I got what was it? Was it a 45? Was that the small record?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I had the 45 of Nadia's theme, which was also the Young and the Restless theme. Yeah. Like, I was a huge fan. And so I met her. So she's married to Bart Connor, who was part of the U.S. men's team in 1984 that won the gold medal.
Yes.
And Bart is probably like the nicest human being ever. You meet him and you are immediately his friend. And so I'm talking with Bart one of the first times I met him, and I mentioned how I was such a huge fan of Nadia's when I was a kid. And I'm like, don't tell her that. I'm like, I would look like a total idiot, here I'm supposed to be a professional. He's like, no, I would never say that. And so then Nadia walks by, and he goes, hey, Dad, come here. And he goes, and he introduces me, and he's like, she was a huge fan of yours when she was a kid. She even had the Nadia theme record. And I just looked at him and I was like, Bart! And he just started laughing. So, and, and I was a little starstruck at meeting Nadia because, just like I said, I was a huge fan when I was a kid. And we've gotten to be friendly. Like, we'll talk and chat and whatever, which is still a little bit surreal to me. But when was it? I think before 2008, I went to Oklahoma, which is where Bart and Nadia live, which still is just completely random to me. But I was sitting in Nadia's office, and we were talking about just her career. And Bart comes in, and he's leaning against the doorway, and he goes, show her the medals. And she just kind of glares at me. She's like, no, she doesn't want to see those. And I'm like, your medals? I said, yeah, I want to see them. And he goes, show her the medals. And so she kind of huffs and puffs, and she leans behind her desk, opens a cabinet. It's not even like an upper cabinet. It's a cabinet that, one of those places that you just throw things because you don't have any other place to put them. She opens the cabinet and starts pulling out boxes, takes the top off of one box, shakes it. There's one gold medal drops out. Takes the top off another box, shakes it. Another gold medal drops out. Pulls a plastic bag that is, like a grocery bag or something, rummages through there, pulls out another medal. And I'm just looking at her, I'm like, those are Olympic medals. And Bart is, of course, still laughing at all of this. And I'm like, what? Why don't you have them somewhere? What? And she said, I know I won them. Which I think is it's such a great attitude to have. But I'm still like, those are Olympic gold medals that you won. Like, you made history when you won these things. And she's like, yeah. So.
Right, and it's in television, so it's on some tape somewhere, so I can prove it without having these little hunks of metal.
Well, and she's like, and she can tell you exactly, she remembers the routines perfectly, so she can describe all that to you. So she's kind of like, whatever. I know I won the medal. What do I need them for?
Oh, that's priceless.
Wow, she should donate them or lend them to a museum or something, because people like me like to look at that stuff.
Yeah, that is
I thought that they were very cool.
Yeah.
Before we end, let's talk about your superpower. Your superpower is finding a Starbucks in any city within 5 minutes of landing. Now, some of them are in airports. How do you find them if not? Do you have some app for that?
I do have an app, the Starbucks app. But also, too, I can just... Generally, if you're in a big city, it doesn't matter what country you're in, there's always going to be one. Like, if you're staying near, say, an American brand hotel, there's almost always one. Or if you're in Europe or Asia, there's always going to be one either in the train station or right around the corner from the train station.
Oh,
she sniffs them out.
So,
good to know.
Yes. But when we were in Rio for the Olympics, there was only like 3 Starbucks downtown or something, and they weren't anywhere close to the Olympic Park. So I went like a month without having a Starbucks, and it was painful. And then there was one day I was covering triathlon because Gwen Jorgensen, who is also from Milwaukee, was competing, and the course happened to be kind of close to where one of the Starbucks was. So I finally got one like 2 days before the Olympics ended.
All right, Nancy, where can we find you on social media or online in general?
You can find me. Our website is sports.usatoday.com. That's where you can find all of our stuff. Mine in particular, you can find me on Twitter at NRArmour or on Instagram at NRArmour. Or you can also find me on Facebook I think it's by Nancy Armour is my professional page. And I post everything that I write there or on Twitter. So either of those two places you can find me.
Excellent. And where will you be coming up as far as, do you have events in the very near future that you'll be traveling to?
I have nothing for the next couple of weeks, but then we get into March Madness, the NCAA tournament. So I will be traveling for that. I'm not sure where yet, but I'm thinking probably Columbus and Kansas City the first 2 weeks.
Excellent. Well, Nancy, thanks so much for your time. We do appreciate your stories and your opinions on these topics that are going on in the world today.
Thanks for coming to play
Thank you very much for having me. This was fun.
Our thanks to Nancy Armour for joining us on the program this week. I've really liked hearing about her take on some of these sports issues, but also the fact that somebody from small town is now working for the big national newspaper.
That's right. She is from right here in Wisconsin. I'm going to shout out to her. She's from Brown Deer.
Okay.
It always amazes me, like, what people do for a living. Like, why would you do that? And
right.
To get to write about sports and not necessarily and get your opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a pretty hefty job because, as she pointed out, some people don't always like her opinion.
Well, right. She's putting herself out there.
Yeah.
And either like it or not, there she is.
This is what I have to say.
So, anyway, thanks again, Nancy, for joining us. Now, you can follow us on Twitter at Fancounters Live. You can also go to the Sharpie Nation Facebook group and join there. And then you can also send us an email if you wish.
At hello@fancounters.com.
Man, you nailed it. Good job.
It's the only thing I'm authorized to do.
Join us again next week for another celebrity guest here on Fancounters.
See ya. Bye.
This was a podcast from the PodFix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.